Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be making some elderberry syrup. There's lots of ways that you can, well I say lots, there's a couple ways that you can come about getting some elderberries. So probably the easiest way is to go online and you can purchase dried elderberries. Now they are expensive. They'll probably cost you around $30 a pound, which I think is a lot. But the other alternative is that you have to do a little bit of research and you need to know what the elderberry plant looks like, and then drive around backcountry roads and look for elderberry plants. So we typically, that's how we do it. We're really fortunate that where we live now, there's a little elderberry patch right across the road from us. So we're able to pick those elderberries. But basically, once you do some research and you know what your elderberry plant looks like, what you're looking for, typically in about late June, early July, the elderberry plant will flower and they'll have these big white flower heads on top of the elderberry bush. And typically around late August, early September is when the berries will ripen. Now, each little patch of elderberries will ripen at different times. So the patch across our road might ripen the end of August, but a couple miles away, it may be 2 weeks later before those are ripened. So you just kind of around June, July, when there's flowering, that's the best time to be able to spot them. And so you'll want to start driving around backcountry roads and kind of scope out where are some elderberry patches. And then you can pick them once they're ripe. And so we have done it a couple of ways as far as like what you do next. So we will take a big trash bag and we will break off as many clumps of berries as we can get from each grove or whatever thing of elderberry bushes. And then you have two options. You can either sit down and pick the berries off right then, like once you get home. You will turn purple. Your fingers will be completely purple. But the berries are pretty resilient and you're able to get them off of the stems pretty well. The other thing that we've tried is that you can freeze them. A quick freeze is better than a long-term freeze because the stems will start to get brittle the longer they're in the freezer. And so then the whole point is that you don't want any stems or as few stems as possible in your elderberries. The stems are poisonous, and so you really don't want to have those stems in the berries that you're going to be using to make elderberry syrup out of. But you know, the clumps look like this, and so you can pick off all those little individual berries, and that we have this bag that we just haven't gotten to yet, and so they've just been in the freezer. We have to be a little bit more diligent once they're extra frozen like that, just to get as many of the stems out as we possibly can. This year I took a little extra time and I pre-bagged measurements of elderberries. So the recipe that I use calls for 1 cup of berries, and so I went ahead and did that. Now for us on the farm, it is a lot busier in the spring, summer, and fall, and so once it gets to be about winter time and there's not a lot of stuff to do outside, that's really when I spend a lot of my time in the kitchen, making elderberry syrup, making salsa, canning different produce that we've frozen over the summer, just because we don't want to heat up our house and we don't have as much time to be standing in the kitchen doing those things. So unless there happens to be a rainy day in the summertime, a lot of our canning stuff gets pushed off until the winter time. Because if you're going to heat up the house, you might as well do it in the winter time when you want that heat anyway. Okay, so for this recipe, you're going to need 1 cup of elderberries. Whether those are dried or whether those are frozen, It's totally fine. Either way will work. You also want kind of a heavy bottomed sauce pot. Okay, so just a sauce pot will work. Then you're going to need 1 cup of water, and then you're going to need 1 teaspoon of ginger and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and then 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. Now I use just ground ginger, cinnamon, and cloves just because that's what's easiest for me to get a hold of and to buy in bulk. Now you can use, fresh grated ginger and whole cloves if you want to, but we just use ground because that's what's easiest for us to purchase. Okay, so you're gonna put your elderberries and your water and all of your seasonings into this pot and stir it up a little bit. And then you're gonna just turn it on. You want to bring this to a boil, okay? And so you're gonna boil this mixture. And then once it's come to a boil, then we will go through the next step of the process. So while this is boiling, it should take about 10 minutes or so, maybe 5 to 10 minutes before it starts boiling. And then once it's boiling, then you're going to turn this heat down and you're going to simmer the mixture for 20 minutes to an hour. And the goal is to reduce the mixture down by half. There's really not a lot in there to begin with. And so sometimes I will double my batch just so that it actually looks like I still have something in there when I'm done. So I'm going to let that get to boiling, and then I'm going to let it simmer, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about what the next step is. Okay? Okay, everyone, so now that your 20 minutes to an hour has passed and your elderberries have boiled and simmered, we are going to put them through a fine mesh bag. That's going to keep all of the seeds from getting into our liquid. Now, there is a toxin called glycoside in elderberries. Inside the seeds, the stems, and the leaves. Now, once you cook your elderberries, that glycoside that's in the seeds is rendered harmless. So it's not recommended that you eat raw elderberries, but once you cook them, they're okay. Okay, so once we have it in this bag, I have on gloves just to keep my hands from turning purple. But we're gonna squeeze out as much liquid as we can. So you want to wait until the berries have cooled off at least a little bit so you're not burning your hands. And once you get all of the liquid squeezed out of your berries, then you're going to add a 1/2 cup of raw honey. And then after that, we're going to turn them into elderberry gummies. So let me get this all squeezed out and then we'll show you how to do that next. Okay, everyone, so I have all of as much juice as I could get squeezed out of those berries, and so now I'm going to add my 1/2 cup of honey. My berries have pretty well cooled off, so you don't want to put your honey in until your berries are about room temperature. Otherwise, all of the good nutrients in your honey will just be killed by the heat. So if you can get honey from a local honey source, then that's great too. It helps with allergies. And so this elderberry syrup, if you use local elderberries and local honey, then you'll be doing well to combat the common cold and flu. So, all right, once I get this mixed up, then we will get started making our elderberry gummies. Okay everyone, so now that we have our elderberry syrup made, we're going to make elderberry gummies. This is really the only way I can get my kids to eat them, and it's not too difficult to do. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to need 1 cup of elderberry syrup, which is basically all of the recipe that we just created. You will use in this. Then you'll need a 1/2 cup of juice or water. We like to use grape juice. There's antioxidants in grape juice as well, so it adds to that nutritional antioxidant boost. And then the next thing that you're going to need is gelatin. So I just use Knox gelatin because it's easy and convenient to get. And so for this recipe, we're going to need 2 envelopes of Knox gelatin. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put a 1/4 cup of your cooled elderberry syrup in a container. And then you're going to pour in both envelopes of the Knox gelatin. And we're going to temper the gelatin. So once we get this in, then we're going to whisk it up. And just, you want to try to get as many of the lumps out as possible. And it will very quickly start to gel this elderberry syrup. Now, once your gelatin is mixed in, then you're going to add your 1/2 cup of hot liquid. Now, it doesn't need to be boiling, it just needs to be hot, so I think I microwaved it for like a minute. And so we're going to pour that in and continue to mix it up. Once it's smooth, then you'll go ahead and you'll pour in the remaining 3/4 cup of your elderberry syrup. Now there are lots of ways that you can make your gummies. I bought these little gummy bear molds off of Amazon, and I think like 1/2 teaspoon fits in each of the gummies or little cavities, and so my youngest, my 8-year-old, needs like 4 gummies a day. I think that the average is about 2 to 3 teaspoons for a child, and then for an adult it's like 1 to 2 tablespoons. And you can take that on a daily basis, and then if you start noticing that you're getting sick, then you can increase that amount. Now the only caveat to that is that you do not want to give this to children under the age of 1 because there is honey in it. And then to fill the cavities, so your gelatin and your syrup and everything's all mixed together, and so the next part would be to fill your mold. So I just use a little medicine dropper. I think at one point when I purchased these molds, it came with an eyedropper, but since then it has disappeared. So we just use a little medicine dropper. It's kind of nice because it tells you, you know, the number of milliliters that you're getting in each bear. So we'll go ahead and fill up all of these little bears, and then whatever I have left, I will just pour into a flat Tupperware container, and then you'll put them in the refrigerator, and they will get nice and set up. And then usually I spray my containers with a little bit of cooking spray before I put them in there, just to kind of help the gummies pop out a little easier. And then once they're all set up, it usually takes about 12 to 24 hours is a good estimate. Then you can just put them into a little glass container and store them in the refrigerator. You can also store just the syrup if you don't have kids, you don't want to make gummies. You can just store the syrup in a little mason jar in the refrigerator, and it is usually good, you know, for about 3 months. There isn't, or I haven't learned, a great way to preserve elderberry syrup to make it like shelf stable. So good rule of thumb is just to use it within 3 months after putting it in the refrigerator. So, hey everyone, so I took my elderberry gummies out of the mold today, and so this is the little bears. This is what they'll look like. And after I put the elderberries stuff into the gummy mold, I had leftovers. So I just used a shallow baking dish, and I just poured the gelatin mixture on the bottom of that, and then I just cut it into little squares when I was done, when it's set up. And so yeah, so this is the finished product.